Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered why the ones who see life most clearly often seem to walk alone? Why the man who understands the dance of existence rarely finds a partner who hears the same music? It is not arrogance, nor exile. It is the natural distance between awakening and illusion. For when a man begins to see, truly see, he realizes that the crowd walks not towards truth, but away from it. And so he steps aside. Stay with me, for this journey is not about loneliness, but about discovering what lies beyond it. As solitude, as transformation, there is a certain kind of solitude that does not come from rejection or despair, but from awakening. It is the stillness that follows the crumbling of illusions, the silence that appears when the noise of the world no longer holds authority over the soul. When a man begins to see through the patterns of society, when he starts to understand that the chase for status, validation, and approval is a game played by the asleep, he finds himself slowly stepping away. This stepping away is not deliberate isolation, but a natural unfolding. Just as a seed must be buried alone before it sprouts, a man must pass through the night of solitude before he becomes who he truly is. The chosen man, as many call him, is not chosen by others. He is chosen by life itself, by the mysterious intelligence that whispers, "Wake up." And in that moment of awakening, he realizes that to see differently is to live differently. The world as he once knew it begins to fade. Conversations that once thrilled him begin to sound hollow. The laughter of the crowd feels forced. The pleasures he used to chase dissolve into shadows of what they once were. It is not that he becomes bitter. Rather, he begins to sense a deeper current moving beneath everything, a current that most people are too distracted to notice. To follow that current means leaving the familiar shore behind. In solitude, transformation begins. The chosen man discovers that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness. In that stillness, all the masks he once wore start to fall away. There is no one left to impress, no role left to play. He stands naked before the truth of his own being, and it is both terrifying and liberating. The crowd finds comfort in numbers, but he must find comfort in nothingness. For it is only in nothingness that he can glimpse the infinite. Solitude tests him. It exposes his fears, magnifies his doubts, and brings to light every false belief he has carried. There are moments when he feels the urge to return to the noise, to seek the comfort of distraction. But something inside him refuses. It is the call of authenticity, the pull of truth. He begins to understand that transformation is not a gentle process. It is fire. It burns away all that is untrue, all that is borrowed, all that was never really his. And in that burning, the man who once sought meaning begins to become meaning itself. Through solitude, he learns to listen. Not to the voices of others, but to the quiet rhythm of existence. He notices the subtle harmony in simple things, the way the wind moves through trees, the way sunlight dances on still water. He starts to sense that life has never been chaotic, only misunderstood. Every pause, every silence, every unanswered question is part of a larger song. In the noise of the world, this song is drowned out, but in solitude, it begins to play again. What once felt like loneliness now becomes sacred space. The chosen man realizes that he was never truly alone. He was simply surrounded by people who could not meet him where he had gone. Solitude reveals that connection does not depend on proximity, but on presence. In the stillness, he feels connected to everything. The earth beneath him, the stars above, the breath moving through his lungs. He begins to understand that existence itself is his companion, and that he is not apart from life, but a part of it. Transformation through solitude is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It is the rediscovery of innocence, the quiet return to the self that existed before ambition, before fear, before the constant need to be seen. In that rediscovery, the chosen man is reborn, not in the eyes of others, but in his own awareness. He does not emerge from solitude as a preacher or a prophet, but as one who has tasted the truth of stillness. And though he may still walk among others, a part of him remains in that inner sanctuary, untouchable, serene, and utterly free. Solitude has not made him separate from the world. It has made him whole within it. Through the alchemy of silence, he has turned loneliness into gold, fear into freedom, and isolation into illumination. Walking alone means walking within. To walk alone is not to move away from the world, but to walk toward the innermost depths of oneself. When a man begins to awaken, he discovers that the real journey is not measured in miles or marked by destinations, It unfolds quietly within the mind, within the subtle landscapes of thought and awareness. The path he travels is invisible to others, yet it feels more real than any road he has ever walked. The more he learns about the outer world, the more he realizes that it has always been a mirror reflecting his inner condition. Every conflict, every joy, every desire was never truly outside of him. It was an echo of his own consciousness. Walking alone means beginning to recognize this truth, that the universe is not something to be conquered, but something to be understood from within. When the chosen man takes his first steps into solitude, he feels a strange emptiness. The noise that once surrounded him begins to fade, and he starts hearing sounds that were always there but unnoticed. The beating of his own heart, the rhythm of his breath, the quiet voice of intuition that he had ignored for so long. It is in this quiet recognition that he begins to walk within. He learns that what he once sought from others, validation, love, purpose, can only be found by turning inward. The world outside may continue to move with chaos and clamor, but inside he begins to sense a deep, unshakable stillness. That stillness becomes his compass. The man who walks within does not do so out of arrogance or disdain for others. He simply realizes that understanding cannot be borrowed. Wisdom cannot be handed down like a possession. It must be discovered in the silence of one's own being, and so he withdraws not to escape people, but to discover what he is without them. In that quiet retreat, he begins to confront the illusions that have shaped his life. He sees that his identity was constructed by the opinions of others, his desires molded by society, his fears inherited from those who never faced their own. As he sheds these layers, he begins to see himself not as a product of the world, but as the awareness behind it. Walking within is not always peaceful. It can be unsettling to face oneself without distraction. The chosen man will meet his own shadows, the fears he buried, the pain he avoided, the memories he pretended were forgotten. There is no one to hide from now, no mask to wear. But this confrontation is sacred. In meeting his darkness, he begins to understand light. He sees that both exist not as enemies, but as parts of the same truth. To walk within is to accept both fully, to let the heart become vast enough to hold joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability, life and death. As he continues the inner journey, something remarkable begins to happen. He notices that the world around him changes, not because it has shifted, but because his perception has. The things that once angered him now appear as lessons. The people he once resented now seem like mirrors reflecting his own unfinished understanding. The chaos of life reveals its hidden order. What once felt like randomness begins to show rhythm, pattern, and purpose. Walking within transforms the way he sees everything. This journey inward also teaches him the true meaning of freedom. He realizes that freedom is not about escaping responsibilities or living without attachment. It is about moving through life without being imprisoned by thought. The world can still speak to him, but its noise no longer rules him. Praise and blame lose their grip. Success and failure appear as passing clouds. He walks calmly beneath them, knowing that his peace depends on nothing outside of himself. In this way, walking within becomes the highest form of strength, the kind that cannot be taken away. And though this inner path may seem lonely, it is here that he discovers the profound connection between himself and all things. The deeper he goes within, the more he sees that there is no true separation. The same consciousness that breathes life into him breathes life into everyone and everything else. The trees, the wind, the strangers he passes, all are part of the same vast unfolding. The more he walks within, the more he feels the unity beneath the illusion of individuality. The chosen man walks alone not because he despises the crowd, but because he understands that to truly meet others, he must first meet himself. Only when he has faced the depths of his own being can he see others clearly, without projection or judgment. Walking within purifies his vision, softens his heart, and deepens his compassion. He no longer seeks company to fill an emptiness. He shares company as an overflow of fullness. The path of walking alone becomes a return to the center, a return to that silent, eternal presence that has always been guiding him, even when he did not know it. Detachment from the crowd. There comes a moment in every awakening soul when the familiar hum of the crowd begins to sound like distant static. The conversations that once mattered, the opinions that once shaped one's identity, the endless pursuit of belonging, all begin to lose their gravity. It is not that the chosen man decides to turn away from people. Rather, he begins to see through them. He realizes that much of what the crowd does is not born of truth, but of fear. Fear of being different, fear of being misunderstood, fear of standing alone. And so, the crowd gathers in its own comfort, mistaking numbers for wisdom and repetition for truth. But the man who awakens feels that invisible thread loosen around him. He cannot pretend any longer. Detachment from the crowd becomes inevitable, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. The crowd has its rhythm, a restless movement driven by anxiety and the desire for validation. It celebrates sameness and punishes authenticity. It asks each person to play a role, to conform, to keep the illusion intact. The chosen man begins to see this theater for what it is, a dance of masks where everyone performs and no one is truly known. He realizes that the approval of the crowd is a fleeting currency. It buys nothing of real value. And when he refuses to perform, the applause fades. Yet in that silence, he finds something infinitely more valuable, his own voice. The first whispers of truth begin to rise within him, fragile but unmistakable, and he knows that if he listens, his life will never be the same again. Detachment is not disdain. The awakened man does not see himself as superior. He understands that everyone is moving according to their own level of awareness, that the crowd is not evil. It is asleep. To be angry at the sleeping makes no sense. Instead, he walks quietly among them, observing the rhythm without being carried by it. He sees people chasing meaning in possessions, chasing love through validation, chasing happiness through control. And he remembers when he too was running. The only difference now is that he has stopped running, and in that stillness, he can finally see the madness of motion for what it is. To detach from the crowd is to lose the false security of belonging. It is to stand in the open air of uncertainty, where opinions no longer define you and the noise no longer dictates your direction. This space can feel frightening at first, because it strips away everything borrowed, every belief, every identity, every illusion of control. Yet as the echoes fade, a profound freedom arises. For the first time, the chosen man begins to act, speak, and live from an inner clarity rather than external pressure. His actions may look simple, even ordinary, but they carry the weight of authenticity. He no longer moves to please others, but to align with truth. As he continues on this path, he begins to notice how deeply the crowd depends on illusion. People cling to opinions not because they are right, but because they are afraid of the void that comes without them. They follow trends not out of desire, but out of fear of being invisible. They worship the noise because silence terrifies them. The chosen man learns that detachment is not about rejecting the world. It is about refusing to be hypnotized by it. It is about learning to stand in the middle of chaos without letting it dictate the rhythm of his heartbeat. This detachment transforms how he experiences life. He no longer seeks validation from those who cannot understand his path. He no longer measures success by the standards of the crowd. He no longer fears misunderstanding or mockery, because he has learned that truth has always been lonely in its early stages. He becomes content in simplicity, at ease in solitude, and at peace with being unseen. The approval he once craved now feels empty compared to the quiet certainty of inner knowing. He learns to walk through the market of opinions like a traveler passing through a busy street, observing, listening, but not lingering. The beauty of detachment is that it does not isolate him forever. In time, it deepens his compassion. Having seen the illusions for what they are, he no longer despises the crowd. He understands it. He sees their pain, their fear, their constant search for meaning in all the wrong places, and he feels a gentle tenderness toward them. For he knows how hard it is to wake up in a world that teaches you to stay asleep. His solitude is not separation, but clarity. It allows him to love without attachment, to care without control, to help without expectation. In detaching from the crowd, the chosen man does not abandon humanity. He returns to it, but with new eyes. He becomes like a quiet mirror, reflecting truth without forcing it upon others. He moves freely among the noise, carrying silence within him. And while the crowd continues to chase, he walks slowly, calmly, as if he already knows what they are searching for. Detachment becomes his strength, his peace, and his way of seeing. His strength in silency. There is a power that does not shout, a force that does not demand attention, and a presence that does not seek validation. It is the strength found in silence, not the silence of fear or suppression, but the silence that grows from understanding. The chosen man discovers, often after great noise and confusion, that silence is not weakness. It is the mark of someone who no longer needs to prove his worth. In a world obsessed with noise, opinions, and endless displays of certainty, the one who can remain silent holds an authority that words can never command. His silence speaks not of emptiness, but of depth, not of absence, but of presence. It is in this quiet that true strength is born. When the chosen man begins to walk his path, he encounters the temptation to speak, to argue, to convince others of what he sees. At first, he may try to explain his awakening, to translate the language of silence into words the world can understand. But soon, he realizes that truth cannot be shouted into someone's mind. Understanding cannot be forced. The more he tries to explain, the more he feels words distort what cannot be captured. So he stops trying. He learns to trust the quiet unfolding of things. He allows his stillness to speak for him. What he once tried to communicate through speech now radiates through his presence. Silence teaches him patience. In the absence of constant reaction, he learns to see the subtler movements of life. The noise of the crowd is quick, impulsive, and fueled by fear, but silence moves slowly, with purpose. It allows him to see the truth behind appearances, to sense what people mean rather than what they say, to feel what situations are rather than what they seem. This deeper perception is not granted to the loud but to the still. In silence, he learns to observe his own thoughts without becoming them, to feel his emotions without being ruled by them. The storms of the world continue to rage, but within him a still lake forms. From that stillness, his strength begins to shine. There is something almost paradoxical about this strength. The chosen man does not use it to dominate others. He uses it to master himself. He no longer needs to defend his truth, because he knows that truth defends itself. He does not rush to correct misunderstandings, for he has seen that every person hears only what they are ready to hear. He does not seek validation through argument because his peace no longer depends on being right. Silence has taught him that most battles are fought to protect the ego, not the truth. And so he lets them pass. He saves his energy for creation, for reflection, for simply being. In silence, he also meets himself more fully than ever before. The absence of sound reveals the presence of thought. He begins to hear his inner voice clearly, not the voice of the conditioned mind that seeks approval, but the voice of awareness itself. It whispers softly, guiding him without force. It tells him that everything he sought outside, power, peace, clarity, has always been within. He realizes that silence is not empty space, but the container of all things. Out of silence arises every word, every action, every breath. To live in awareness of that silence is to live in harmony with existence itself. As he grows more comfortable in silence, he notices its effect on others. People are drawn to him, though they may not understand why. In his quiet presence, they feel safe, unjudged, and seen. His silence allows others to rest, to lower their defenses, to hear their own thoughts again. He becomes a mirror in which others glimpse their own forgotten peace. This is the true power of silence. It does not need to persuade, it simply reminds. His calmness spreads like ripples across water, touching lives without a single word spoken. The chosen man no longer fears silence as emptiness, for he has discovered it to be fullness beyond measure. It is the field in which everything arises and dissolves. It is the foundation of wisdom, the breath of understanding, the heartbeat of the universe. In silence, he finds that all opposites are reconciled: strength and softness, movement and stillness, life and death. The world may continue to rush and shout, but he walks gently, his quiet presence more powerful than any proclamation. He knows now that true strength is not about control, conquest, or resistance. It is about surrendering to what is, without complaint, without noise, without fear. The man who has found strength in silence has discovered something indestructible within himself. His silence is not retreat, it is radiance. It is not escape, it is mastery. Through silence, he has become unshakable, for nothing outside him can disturb what he has found within. A loneliness vs. aloneness. There is a subtle yet profound difference between loneliness and aloneness. One wounds, the other heals. Loneliness is a shadow that falls when we have forgotten our own light, a sense of emptiness born from seeking connection outside ourselves. Aloneness, on the other hand, is the recognition that we are whole, even in silence, even in solitude. It is not the absence of others, but the presence of oneself. The chosen man learns this distinction not through books or teachers, but through the slow unraveling of his own experience. When he first steps away from the crowd, what he feels is loneliness. The familiar noise of companionship fades, and with it goes the illusion of belonging. He stands alone in the vastness of his own awareness, and at first, it terrifies him. But over time, that fear transforms into peace, for he realizes that he has not lost anyone, he has simply found himself. Loneliness is born from dependence. It whispers that we are incomplete without others, that our value is confirmed only by the reflection of another's gaze. It clings to relationships, to validation, to attention, and when those things are taken away, it panics. It mistakes company for connection, noise for love, and routine for meaning. The chosen man, in his solitude, begins to see how often he too had mistaken proximity for understanding. Surrounded by people, he had still felt unseen. Engaged in endless conversations, he had still felt unheard. It was only when he withdrew that he began to understand the difference between being surrounded and being known. Loneliness fades not by adding more people to our lives, but by deepening the relationship we have with our own being. As the chosen man learns to be alone, he begins to see aloneness as a sacred space rather than a punishment. In that quiet, he starts to hear the faint hum of existence, the rhythm of life that was always there, waiting beneath the noise of the world. He discovers that his mind, once restless and afraid, begins to settle. Thoughts that once tormented him now drift by like clouds. The heart, once desperate for attention, begins to soften and open. He feels connected, but not to people, to life itself. He feels the pulse of the universe within his breath, the vastness of creation in every still moment. This is aloneness, not isolation, but union with the whole. In aloneness, he discovers intimacy beyond the reach of words. It is a quiet companionship with his own soul. He begins to converse with himself, not in the chatter of the mind, but in the language of awareness. He learns to sit beside his own thoughts without judgment, to observe his emotions without being consumed by them. The silence that once seemed oppressive becomes a friend, a mirror, a teacher. He realizes that what he feared as emptiness was actually space to grow, to breathe, to be. Loneliness demands to be filled. Aloneness celebrates the emptiness. This transformation changes the way he relates to others. When he was lonely, he sought people to fill a void. Now, in aloneness, he meets people from wholeness. He no longer needs them to complete him. He simply enjoys their presence as an extension of his own completeness. Relationships become lighter, freer, more genuine. There is no grasping, no fear of loss, no need to be validated. He can love without attachment and care without expectation. The love that arises from aloneness is not possessive, it is radiant. It flows effortlessly like sunlight, expecting nothing in return. The chosen man sees that most suffering in relationships comes from loneliness disguised as love. Two incomplete beings clinging to each other in fear of their own emptiness. But when two people meet from aloneness, their togetherness becomes a celebration, not a dependency. It is no longer about escaping themselves, but about sharing the joy of self-discovery. The man who knows aloneness becomes incapable of using others as distractions. He no longer hides behind social masks or pleasantries. His interactions are simple, honest, and alive. To be alone is to stand face to face with existence with no buffer, no audience, no pretense. It is to realize that the essence of life was never in the crowd, but in the silent pulse that animates everything. The chosen man begins to feel gratitude for his solitude, because it stripped him of everything false and returned him to what is real. He no longer dreads being alone because he understands that existence itself is never lonely. The trees stand in silence, yet they are full of life. The stars drift in infinite space, yet none of them are isolated. In their stillness they belong to the whole, and so does he. Loneliness may visit him from time to time, as all human emotions do, but it no longer has power. He greets it like an old friend and watches it pass, knowing that it is only the shadow of a deeper truth. For beneath the fleeting ache of loneliness lies the eternal peace of aloneness, the knowing that he is, and that is enough, sets the path beyond approval. There comes a time when a man must choose between being understood and being free. For most of his life, he has been trained to seek approval. From parents, from teachers, from friends, from the faceless crowd that dictates what is acceptable, respectable, and successful. Every decision he made was in some way shadowed by the question, what will they think of me? And so he learned to wear masks. He became what the world wanted him to be, not what he truly was. He smiled when he wanted to cry, agreed when he wanted to question, and followed when he longed to lead himself. Yet deep inside, something remained restless. unsatisfied, incomplete. That something is the soul, and the soul cannot breathe in the cage of approval. The chosen man at last hears its cry and decides to walk away from the crowd, not in arrogance, but in awakening. Ladies and gentlemen, that moment, when a person finally says, "I will no longer live for their applause," is the birth of freedom. It is also the beginning of loneliness, misunderstanding, and resistance, for the world rarely welcomes those who refuse to conform. The path beyond approval is not smooth. It is filled with doubt, temptation, and the echoes of voices that once shaped your identity. Every step forward feels like rebellion, yet something within whispers that it is the only way home. The chosen man learns that approval is the most seductive prison of all, because its bars are invisible. It promises comfort and belonging, but it steals authenticity. It rewards imitation, not truth. When the chosen man stops seeking validation, the world becomes strangely silent. The compliments fade, the social circles shift, and those who once cheered him may now question his change. He realizes how deeply approval had been woven into his life, how it dictated his choices, his beliefs, even his dreams. The absence of that familiar validation feels like a void, and at first he may struggle to fill it. But slowly he begins to see that the emptiness is not punishment, it is space. Space to rediscover who he is without the weight of expectations. Space to think freely, act boldly, and listen to the quiet guidance of his own intuition. To walk beyond approval is to enter a world where truth becomes more valuable than acceptance. The chosen man no longer asks, "Will they like me?" but rather, "Is this real for me?" He stops measuring his worth by the applause of others and begins to measure it by his own integrity. He finds that when he lives in alignment with his truth, even if no one understands, there is peace. But when he betrays himself for approval, even if everyone praises him, there is emptiness. This understanding becomes his compass. It guides him not through the opinions of others, but through the resonance of his own soul. He begins to notice that those who chase approval never rest. They are constantly performing, constantly adjusting, constantly fearing rejection. Their happiness depends on unpredictable tides, likes, opinions, fleeting admiration. But the chosen man, having stepped beyond this game, begins to taste the flavor of freedom. He no longer seeks to be liked by everyone because he has accepted that truth will always divide. To be true to oneself is to be misunderstood by many, but that is the price of authenticity. And once he pays that price, he realizes it was never as costly as he feared. The real cost was living a lie for the sake of comfort. The path beyond approval is not about isolation but sovereignty. It is the art of standing within oneself without needing the world's permission to exist. The chosen man may still walk among people, still share, still love, but he no longer depends on their recognition to feel real. His sense of worth arises from within, from the quiet knowing that he is walking his own path, guided by something deeper than the shifting moods of the crowd. He becomes self-contained, not in ego, but in awareness. As he continues on this path, something remarkable happens. The very people who once doubted him begin to respect him. Not because he sought their respect, but because authenticity commands it naturally. When a man no longer chases approval, he embodies a calm confidence that cannot be faked. His energy changes, grounded, certain, peaceful. He speaks less but means more. He acts without waiting for applause, and in doing so, inspires others to do the same. His presence becomes a reminder that true leadership begins with self-trust. He understands that approval was never wrong. It was simply misunderstood. The need for it comes from a childlike place within us that longs to belong, to be seen, to be loved. But the chosen man no longer seeks belonging in others, he finds it in existence itself. He belongs to the moment, to the silence, to the truth of being alive. He walks quietly now, not in defiance but in freedom. For he has discovered the greatest liberation of all, to act, to speak, to live, without asking for permission.